whoever's out there looking at trying to do this, know it's going to be hard, know it's going to take almost more than you've ever had, and it's not going to make much sense, it's not going to make financial sense, but by God, I bet you should, and you should try and learn from this and try and get here, because
now Parker's around, guys. Parker Kligerman in the 48 spins the caution tower.
Parker Kligerman's NASCAR career has proven that hard work and dedication can lead to success in motorsports. Parker came from humbler beginnings than most NASCAR drivers, but he won multiple races and competed in hundreds of events across NASCAR's top 3 series. He simultaneously reported from pit road for NBC Sports, even on days right after a grueling race, all while managing his own media companies and his podcast, The Money Lap. Parker has cemented his legacy as a true cult hero among NASCAR diehards. Parker Kligerman just retired from full-time competition in 2024 after making the NASCAR Xfinity Series playoffs, and is just beginning a new chapter in his life. Parker just ran the 24 Hours of Daytona and is making more NASCAR Truck Series starts this year. Parker is going to be joining us shortly, but before we get to the video, I want to share a couple of thoughts with you. When you think of NASCAR today, we all know how much money influences who gets what rides, who gets what opportunities, and finance affects every race car driver. If you consider yourself a NASCAR fan, there's never been a better time to pay attention to what's going on with the sport than right now. The future of this sport relies on brave individuals to forge their own paths and shape the future of the sport in their image. If you're new to this channel, let me introduce myself. My name is Zach, and my goal is to grow this YouTube channel. We'll be covering the politics, personalities, and on-track battles in NASCAR, all while trying to simultaneously grow my own driving career. A year and a half ago, I moved to Charlotte to try to further my racing career, and I had a list of drivers that I wanted to connect with to try to get a sense of their energy and maybe some advice. In the infield of Charlotte Motor Speedway, I locked eyes with Parker Kligerman and I walked up to him. He was the first guy I saw. He gave me a little bit of advice and we exchanged numbers. It's so important to have role models to look up to. Men with courage, competence, and willpower are always great, but even better when they're in your industry and you can look up directly to them. Parker's a guy who forged his own path in NASCAR and has had success behind the wheel and in front of the camera. I reached out to Parker shortly after his retirement announcement, and he graciously accepted my invitation to collaborate in reacting to some of his career's greatest moments. I felt the timing was right, as he's just ending his career and I'm trying to accelerate my efforts on social media. Today, we'll be getting the opportunity to do just that with Parker. I've selected some of the most inspirational moments, and we'll be hearing about his perspective on some of the greatest moments in his career. And lastly, if you're an aspiring racing driver, caution, you might be inspired by what you're about to see. So buckle up. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Parker Kligerman. Hey guys, welcome in. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Mr. Parker Kligerman himself for joining us today on ZBC Racing. And today we're going to take a look at some of Parker's greatest moments in his career and get his thoughts on them. So thank you so much, Parker.
yeah. Glad to be here, man. Thanks for doing this. Looking forward to looking back. It's not something I like to do too often in terms of looking back, but it is always fun to see some good moments. I hope we only have good ones. If you do bad one, that's going to be a problem. But I'm sure you've picked some good ones. There has been some good ones as well.
Yes, there's been some good ones. I think looking back on things is really hard, especially when you're in the heat of the moment. But sometimes, I hate looking back on old clips of myself, just to be honest, because I just cringe. But, I think it's a kind of a good point because, you just stepped out of full-time NASCAR and now you're kind of going forward. So, but nonetheless, I do appreciate you for coming on. So we're going to start in 2009, where Parker Kligerman started his National Series career. Well, I guess not National Series, but it is the ARCA Series, is where Parker basically dominated the 2009 season. He had a stunning rookie year, and the ARCA Series is the series where NASCAR drivers cut their teeth. They get ready to start rising up the ranks, and let's jump right into this clip and get Parker's thoughts on it after.
Then Kligerman, with all those top 10 finishes in his career, wins his very first ARCA race this afternoon in the Menards 200.
Who was on us? Was it that top race?
Parker Kligerman's out of the car, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hear it for the winner, Parker Kligerman.
What is he doing?
Well done.
We just mimicked what he did. Just play the game. You make everyone else play your game.
Now, one more 4 to the checkered flag. Parker Kligerman wins the Prairie Meadows 200. Turn out. Let him have it, Parker.
Sick and he's spitting fire and Mike got him out the dryer. He's hot, found him in Fort
Batteries coming out of Iowa Speedway. Make some noise for Parker Kligerman.
On in a big way. Parker Kligerman looking for room. He's got a fender inside the 6 car. In turn 3, the leaders are side by side. Parker Kligerman on the inside. Justin Luffman on the high side. Ron Cox now. He now starts to pull up inside there too. Side by side. We've got a new leader. It's Parker Kligerman. Up to second comes Ron. Parker Kligerman. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed it, give it up for
Coming out of turn 4, they're going to be side by side. Lofton trying to make the move. He's going to the inside. It's going to be Kligerman that will take the win.
It was the 2009 season, Parker. I'm sure, looking back on it, as we all have aged, we look back and we all see the younger versions of ourselves. But honestly, it's pretty cool to be able to look back and see just massive success. So you win 9 races in your first ARCA season. And actually you did a race in ARCA in 2008, but your first full-time season. So you're technically a rookie and you end up finishing second in the points. So tell me a little bit about how did you finish second in the points, winning 9 races, and B, how did that opportunity come up?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there because first and foremost, the thing that sticks out to me is all the different ways people pronounce my name back then. So it hasn't changed. It was Kligerman. At least there was no Klingermans, which is the most frustrating one. But the thing that really sticks out to me from that time period that people don't really know is that, that was the height of the recession. It was a big opportunity to go to Penske and become a development driver there. But one of the things that was really tough was that we went into that season with about, 8 races of funding. And it was Michael Nelson at Team Penske who, with Cunningham Motorsports, and really a lot of the program was supported by Briggs Cunningham and Roger Penske. Michael Nelson said, hey, why don't we do the first 8 and just see if we can come up with the funding to keep going the rest of the year. So we did that, and that race we won at Toledo was my first win. That was 5 races in, I want to say, and it really propelled us to go on a streak of winning. I think at one point we won like 5 or 6 in a row. And the thing, though, that even as we got late in the season, we were dominating the points. We still were race by race funding wise. So people don't really know that, but that blank car was struggling to make it to every race. But it was a really cool year. It was a great, one of my most fond memories of my life so far. And the thing that's frustrating is you mentioned finishing second in points, but we won 9 out of 21 races, which is basically half of them. But Lofton won the championship because for 1 year and 1 year only, they had qualifying points, which you got 15 points for getting the pole and then so on and so forth down to third. And Lofton got more poles than me. So when we went down the last race of the season at Rockingham, we had to lead the most laps and win the race, beat him by like 3 spots. And he got the last spot he needed on the last lap or last couple laps, something like that. And so we ended up losing the championship by 5 points, which was exactly 1 position on the racetrack all year, or just 1 difference in the top 3 in qualifying all year. So it was really tight. We won the most races by 3, I want to say, but it was a cool year in terms of battling with Justin and just, being at Team Penske and getting my feet wet in the stock car world. And Chris Carrier, who you see at the beginning, dump a like Mountain Dew on my head. He was the crew chief. He was the one who, really was my mentor at Team Penske and sort of made a lot of that happen and just taught me so much and has been my crew chief at the 75 of Henderson Motorsports for the last couple of years. So it's cool to look back at that. It was quite a time. I remember winning my pole, my first start in Xfinity after that. And I literally was like, damn, we'll be in Cup tomorrow. Like, this isn't hard. And when I transitioned, going to stock cars in ARCA and really when I got to ARCA, I had done like a handful of oval starts in my entire life and only a handful of car races. And so it was a really quick accession, but no personal funding or anything. I was just jumping lily pad to lily pad, and it was quite a ride.
So yeah, that sounds pretty crazy. And I do have a question. It's like you tell me you're coming into the season and you have 8 races scheduled. Did the way that you performed in that race car have anything to do with you being able to run that full year?
100%. It was all about winning. At the time, went into that with a development deal with Team Penske, but also it was sort of, a really tough time financially for the world, right? It was a great recession, and, the Team Penske was in a good position, but obviously Roger, being involved in the business world, was, feeling the ramifications of what everyone was at the time of being a scary time economically. And so
right.
it came down to winning, and we had to win, and I knew that, and we had good results to start, but when we finally got that win at Toledo, it really just, I think, propelled things going forward. And then we knew we had to keep winning, we had to keep performing, we had to find ways to stay in the championship hunt, because it was the only way we were going to continue for the full season. And that race at Toledo, I just wanted one more fact about it.
Sure.
That was where I made my first oval stock car start in 2008, which I had done one other ARCA start at New Jersey Motorsport Park. We qualified second and finished sixth. I finished top 10 at Toledo in 2008. And then going back there, I spent months on the ARCA sim at the time trying to get better at ovals, because I knew I was not up to snuff on what it took to be good at ovals. So I actually went and did this like purposeful deal where I lifted the start finish line in the sim and like forced myself to drive it all sorts of different ways. And so when we got there, we were pretty good. And then we got in the race and eventually got to the lead. And I think we led like 110 laps, and we held off Kenny Schrader and Paul Menard in those last restarts at the end on older tires than them. And a lot of that I attribute to what I did on the sim. And it sort of gave me the confidence, like, hey, you can figure out this oval thing. You just won and beat some of the, some cup level drivers doing it. So it was quite a big moment for me.
Epic. Okay, so this is the start of your career. And basically, guys, what you just heard is he may not have had the total opportunity, but he just basically made it happen with massive wins back to back to back. Ended up winning 9 races, finishing shy of the championship by 1 point. So then the next year, Parker switches to Xfinity full-time with Ganassi and Penske. Am I right, Parker?
No, it was a part-time deal.
Or part-time, excuse me.
Yep.
Excuse me.
Yep.
And then moved.
It wasn't Ganassi. It was a Philly. It was a team that bought all of Ganassi's stuff, or most of their Xfinity stuff, as they shut down their Xfinity team at the end of 2008 or 2009.
Yeah, I saw it had like a different name than just Ganassi. So what was it called?
Team 42.
Team 42. Interesting. So part-time, has some success, and gets the opportunity with Brad Keselowski Racing, then a new team in the Truck Series, to run full-time in 2011. And there's 2 clips in 2011. You had a lot of success with that team in your first year, but there's a couple clips in specific that I want to talk and ask you about. So let's pull these clips up.
Last few races, just getting stronger and stronger. Look at, he's moving to the outside of Hornaday.
Kligerman trying to take second away from Hornaday, using that outside line. See if momentum works as he comes out of turn number 2. Back through the tri-oval, Kylebusch, Jason White, 1 and 2. Green flag back in the air.
A good start by Kyle. Look at Elliott Sadler making it 3 wide for second.
Parker Kligerman on the outside trying to take second away as well. Kligerman with the momentum on the outside. He's going to get second away from Elliott Sadler.
Elliott got really loose. That puts him in the middle of 3 wide.
Jason White back to the bottom, trying to grab third away from Sadler, but look at Brendan Gaughan on the outside, bringing Todd Bodine with him.
Brendan Gaughan moves up to third. Bodine moves into the 4th spot. Can Parker Kligerman reel in the 18? 1 lap of racing to go when they get to the stripe. White flag in the air.
Todd Bodine, we haven't hardly talked about the entire race. He's running 4th right now, trying to get third away from his teammate.
Parker Kligerman trying to find a way around the 18 of Kylebusch. Kylebusch trying to hang on with a truck he didn't think could win tonight.
He's got to make 2 more turns, and it's going to go straight to victory lane, Rick.
Kylebusch in the Dollar General number 18 didn't practice earlier this morning in the truck, but he didn't need it. Victory lane is the next stop for the 18 of Kylebusch.
3 wide for the 6th.
We're a tiny team. Just came together late. I put us in a little bit of a hole at the beginning of the year in terms of kind of crashing trucks and such. But, I kind of got my head screwed on straight here these last few races, and we've just slowly chipped away at it. Qualifying 1 better each week. Obviously finishing second twice in a row. And, as a tiny team, we need those little breaks that we just had to get trucks built and such.
You finished second at Texas, and you're really starting to step things up with Brad Keselowski Racing, and a lot of consistency coming your way on like a small team. You end up finishing second at Texas. I believe that second place was actually penalized and you got the P2, but then is that accurate?
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember.
Yeah. But then the next race, you're sitting behind Kyle Busch with 2 laps to go, and it's overtime at Kentucky. What is going through your mind as you're chasing down arguably one of the best drivers of ever?
I don't really remember. I remember more of the larger sentiment at the time, which, you know, in that interview I sort of mentioned, you know, this was a small team that Brad Keselowski Racing that was its first year. We had done one start together in 2010 when we finished top 10 at Texas and started to build that program. We were the only Dodge running out there. And so it was a tough start. It was definitely tough being young and trying to build a team at the same time and that sort of thing. And as I had mentioned, I think I crashed some trucks early on and that sort of stuff, trying too hard. So that put us behind. And then we got in those summer months and really started to hit our stride. And, you know, chasing down Kyle Busch, I mean, he was the GOAT at the time, still is, of trucks and Xfinity. And so it was always going to be a tough one. And I knew I didn't think we probably had a truck to beat him. But at Texas, the one prior, I do feel like on the restart where you're mentioning that there was a penalty, I feel like I spun the tires a little bit when we were in the top three. And if I had just gotten a better restart, I think we would have won it. So that one was the one I remember the worst because that would have been so big. And I remember actually talking to Roger Penske after those 2 second place finishes. He was all pumped. He's like, look, it's exactly what you're supposed to be doing, putting yourself in the right position, that sort of thing. But, you know, we just didn't win. And so that became the problem. And you're a young driver, you got to find a way to win. It's the only thing that matters in this sport. And I didn't find a way to do it at the time. But I also noticed I had an odd Southern accent in that interview. I don't know where that came from or what was going on. I do remember maybe. Something like that. I think, you know, I was surrounded by so many Southern people and being so young and impressionable that I started to like gravitate to their way of speaking. And I do remember my parents and some of my friends being like, why do you sound Southern when you talk on the interviews? And I was like, what are you talking about? And I never really heard it. So I just listen now. So that's the most concerning part, to be honest. I absolutely am not Southern. I'm from Connecticut. I lived there for 5 years, and obviously spent a ton of time in Charlotte, but I don't know where that came from. So I'm glad that's gone. But yeah, I think, you know, at the time when you're in that era, it was a really tough time for young drivers because the development programs were sort of still in the nascent stage of figuring out what a young driver really needs. And that program, it came together super late. It was late 2010. It was going to go to a funded driver who had a bunch of family funding. I was going to have nothing in 2011. And I actually ended up calling Roger Penske and then Briggs Cunningham and Brad Keselowski and got them all to agree simultaneously one night, probably right around Thanksgiving or actually maybe December. I got them to all agree to to put in the funding needed for us to go the full year. And so that's how we were able to put the year together. But it didn't mean we had a large budget by any means, but thankful to those three for giving me that chance and seeing the potential of what we could do. And I think by the time we got to the end of that year, we, turned BKR into a really formidable force that led well into 2012.
Yeah. So that's a good segue into 2012 because, you start 2012 and you're still with BKR, right? I'm doing some research on your career. It's hard to find, maybe the exact reason, the stuff that's happening 13 years ago, but midway through 2012 in the truck series, you end up making the switch to Red Horse Racing, driving the number 7 Toyota. And so before we get into the next clip, what happened there?
It's a great question. So by 2012, I had been with Team Penske basically since my first test at the end of 2008, and I had not done many actual starts for Team Penske. And I was young and obviously brash and like most race car drivers, full of themselves and not making the best decisions. And I like to tell people, when you're 18 or 17, even through 21 or whatever, you do a lot of growing up. And I happen to do that in front of one of the most storied and professional organizations in the world, and especially in motorsports at Team Penske. So that relationship changes from being maybe more of a business relationship and a team atmosphere to almost being a little bit like they're your mentors and family. And so they see the good and the bad of what, as you grow up. And I think I could have been far more mature at that time, for sure. As we got through the midway of 2012, it just was obvious that I hadn't won yet. We were doing great things in the trucks, but we just hadn't won. And came to me when I was supposed to do a fair amount of the starts in the 22 Xfinity car, and I had done like 2 already. They came to me and basically said, you're free to look elsewhere. At the end of this year, we're not renewing your contract, that sort of thing. And we're actually going to take away some of your starts in the Xfinity car. So you got one more, and then Ryan Blaney's going to take over. That would kind of put the writing on the wall. Now, my deal with Brad was separate from their deal with Team Penske, but it was obviously combined because he was a Team Penske driver. And we had sponsorship that year that they had gotten over the offseason. season or through 2011 into the off season and had come on board the truck. I remember knowing that probably not a good sign that the parent organization is basically telling me I'm being let go. I asked Brad, hey, are we going to still fight for this championship? Because at the time we were right there in the top 5 in points. And he said, sure thing, just keep doing what you're doing. So we went to like 1 or 2 more races. And then it was at Pocono. We finished like, I don't know, 7th or something. And got done with the race and I got asked to go meet Brad at his bus. And he basically just said, hey, I think we should go our separate ways. And I was like, couldn't agree more. Let's move on. This is an odd relationship at this point. I didn't have any ride. I had no funding, but I was 5th in points. I think only like 25 points out of the lead. So we were right there halfway through the season. And so I immediately leaving the racetrack started calling other teams and being like, hey, I'm in 5th in points. I got no money, but like, who wants to take a chance? Actually, Briggs Cunningham was gracious enough to help me secure a deal with Red Horse Racing, and they had a team that had done majority of the starts for the year, that 7 trucks. It was ready and willing and ready to go. And so we were able to put that deal together to go complete the second half of the season, where I still stayed basically a contracted Team Penske driver for the rest of the year, which I ended up doing a couple things for them, including my first race at Red Horse. I practiced and qualified the 22 Cup car at Michigan and went P1 in practice for a while and everything, which was a great, crazy story. I don't even know how it came about, but we were so fast or I know how it came about. So AJ obviously had his unfortunate situation. So then Sam Hornish was driving the car and they basically came to me and said, hey, we need you to practice and qualify it because Sam is going to be in Montreal driving the Xfinity car. So I went to Michigan doing that and driving my first race for Red Horse. And in practice, I remember going out there and we had a red flag right at the start. So I'm sitting on pit road and there goes sitting next to like Jeff Gordon. Tony Stewart flies by and I'm like, oh boy, we've made it to the top, man. What are you doing? Like Jimmy Johnson's right ahead of us. And so it's Michigan. It's 220 mile an hour speeds into turn 1. And we did a Q run right off the truck, which is like the first practice. Everyone did Q runs and they were like, you can do it. No problem. So I'm like, all right, fine. So we go out there and I do a lap and I get done. I'm like, how was that? And they're like, well, that's P1. And I'm like, oh, okay. How many cars have gone? I'm thinking like 7 cars have gone. Like, hey, there's no way you're going to be fastest in Cup. And they're like 34. I was like, bro. Oh, we're actually fast. So we ended up like 7th in that practice, but we went faster than Brad on all the practices, beat him in qualifying. And then I begged Roger to let me race it on Sunday, but it wasn't to be because of sponsors and all that stuff. So it was a really cool experience. And then in the truck, in my first Red Horse start, I was pretty convinced we won the race because we were on this late green flag cycle. We end up passing James Busher in the last lap in the last corner, which I thought was for the win. Turns out there was 3 trucks who stayed out on fuel and stretched their fuel. So we ended up finishing 4th. I celebrated.
Where was this?
Michigan 2012. So I celebrated like we had won, and then they were like, "Hey man, sorry, 3 trucks stayed out on fuel." But you know who won that race? It was Nelson Piquet Jr. But his crew chief was Chris Carrier, who was my crew chief in ARCA and my first Xfinity starts, and then became where we joined back up at the 75 team at Henderson Motorsports. So he took my win from me on a validating weekend, but it's all right. It was a big day for him as well.
That's the worst because I was racing in a slightly bigger series in the truck series. I was racing on NASCAR Heat 5 last week, right?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Super huge. And I was at Michigan and I had played the whole deal right. And then literally 3 people stretched their fuel in the game. Might not have been as the real deal as yours, but I guess I can say I know the feeling a little bit. That being said, though, 2012 was probably a pivotal season for you because in this next moment, we're going to take a look at another highlight of your career at one of my favorite tracks, and that's going to be Talladega.
This time by, white flag will fly. They're side by side, and the 31 of James Busher gets shoved out of the way. Here comes the 3 of Ty Dillon.
Ty's able to get back down to the white line. How about Ryan Blaney now battling for 3rd?
Here comes Ty Dillon, a little wiggle out of the 29. The next flag that flies is the one that will determine the winner of this race.
Can't believe they made it through turn 2.
Unbelievable. That 4 trucks, now they're wrecking.
And now they're going to wreck behind them. Trucks sliding all over. Will the caution come out, though?
No caution yet.
No caution. They're still... And the caution comes out. Now the caution comes out. In front of the field is Parker Kligerman.
Take your position.
Parker Kligerman is going to win his first ever Camping World Truck Series race, and it's going to come at Talladega Superspeedway.
Being in the right place when it got down towards the end of the race, Parker Kligerman was, with a lot of help from that 13 truck.
We didn't have any idea that with 10,
see somebody like that have some success.
How about that? He's gonna claim the infield here at Talladega with his checkered flag.
He may go try to claim victory lane too.
He's like,
he needs to.
there you go. That's a fun celebration.
That's great.
So you got the swag, you come out, you win Talladega, and you plant the flag, and things are going well for you. Walk us through, what was going through your mind. You see the caution, and just take us through a little bit about, what's going through your mind as far as not only like winning that race, but as far as, hey, like, I got to start making some calls. Did you have any plans for the next year, which we're about to get into? How did this change things? But first, let's get into a little bit, what were your feelings on the day, and then how did that change things for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little background to that. That was there was a lot going on in the background. So, when I went to Red Horse, we had immediate success, and I remember thinking, man, this is what I've been racing against. These are incredible trucks, and we were so fast that we went to Iowa, the second race, I want to say, with them, or third, whatever. And we were like 2/10 faster in the field in practice. We won the pole, set a new track record. I think we won the pole by 2/10 and led the first half of the race until Jennifer Jo Cobb blew an engine in 3 and 4. We spun out in the oil that she had laid down and took the sway bar arm off. And the truck that went on to win that race, even though it was like we were walking away with it, was the 29 truck, Brian Blaney, my old truck.
Yep.
So it was like the biggest kick there was in the, where. So we were on, I saw some people at the time were calling it like a redemption tour, and it really was. I mean, we just kept reeling top fives everywhere. We were super fast and qualifying up front every week. And just, it was evident that by that point at Talladega, we should have won like 3 or 4 races. But we were still in the championship hunt. But going into Talladega, I think the week prior was Vegas, or 2 weeks prior. I actually had once again had the fastest truck, and we had it won, and we blew a right front tire coming back to the field because I think I sped on pit road, and I was in a lot of trouble. My supporters were pretty unhappy. The team was pretty unhappy. I was in a pretty tough spot because we were still in a championship position, but it was becoming evident, like, hey man, you got to win. Like, this is ridiculous at this point. So I like to say, whenever I've needed it, there's always Talladega, because we went into Talladega and I thought, I'm going to win this damn race come hell or high water. And we got late in that race. We had to change a battery, and then we got back to the field. And on that last restart, I remember utilizing the tandem with Johnny Sauter and doing some things with the brake and that sort of stuff that kept the tandem far more attached than probably others had realized, because I had done a ton of tandem testing with Team Penske in the last couple of years. And therefore, he likes to say if that had gone green, he had a way to dump me, but I was never going to let him off by rear bumper, or I was going to make sure to detach from him at the right place. Nonetheless, when the caution came out, it was the biggest relief, because it was like, all right, didn't have to do the hardest part, which was to hold on to this lead by the start finish line. So it was a big relief, validation, all those things. That planting the flag came about from years prior. It was like 2010. And I was living with my roommates down at UNC Charlotte, and they were like, hey, if you win a NASCAR race, what are you going to do? And I was like, well, I don't know. What should we do? And they were like, well, you got to do something different. And I was like, okay, well, what if, like, when you conquer a country in war, you plant the flag? I was like, let's plant the flag. It's a conqueror. So I can't even believe that I remembered it when we finally won that race at Talladega, but it became a cool thing. And obviously people remember it, and it's something people still bring up to me to this day. So it's a cool celebration. I wish I got to do it more, but that win was, big for me, because it probably saved me in more ways than one. And it, propelled us to continue our championship fight.
So I have a couple questions regarding that last lap, because I got 2 questions. So just, you were telling me about Johnny Sauter, telling you he was maybe wanting to take the lead with a nice little move there. Now, of course, you didn't make it all the way back to the checkered. Did you get any feedback from any specific drivers that said, hey, I would have passed you if that caution didn't come out? Anything like that?
Yeah, just Johnny. He came up to me afterwards. He was like, congrats, I'm glad to help you out. But, I would have
passed you.
I was like, all right, buddy, whatever.
So how you know, comparing that to a win under green, how does it feel to win? Like, you're passing the white flag, you've got a wreck behind you, you don't know if NASCAR is going to call the caution, because sometimes, you know, maybe it happens a little bit later in the lap and there's a little bit, you know, less of a safety risk. How does that compare to some of your other wins under green flag when you know, there's obviously a sense of relief, but how does it compare as far as, do you go there doubting a little bit, or is a dub a dub?
Yeah, it's a win. You know, I think until the caution's called, you just drive it like it's still green. Right. And you can't really like anticipate. Like, I knew that, I heard there was a wreck behind us, but until I hear caution, I'm just driving it as if I've got to win the race. Right. So,
right.
I mean, occasionally there's things you can maybe do if you start to see, you know, say you were Johnny and you were pushing me and you start to see that wreck behind you. Maybe he could have taken a risk of trying to pop out inside draft or whatever and be in the lead by the time they call a caution, and hope that those timing loops or whatever work in your advantage, that sort of thing. But I think normally you've got to continue to drive as if you're going to the checkered, and then you know, the yellow just negates that.
Yep. So basically, a dub's a dub, and you know, you're gonna have to make your way back towards the checkered flag regardless. So why not just floor it? I like that method of thinking, because I have seen, you know, obviously some guys, they're like, damn, you know, the rain delay, or, you know, I've just seen like a bunch of guys, but I'd probably be of the mentality like, hey, you know, I put my truck or my car in the position to be where it had to be. So massive win. And before we get into, you know, recapping the next couple of steps in your career, did this win change things for you? Did this open up any opportunities? Did this help form your plans for 2013?
Yeah, I think it did. I think it helped. And, you know, winning is everything in this sport, and it's the only thing that matters. And so, you know, there's a lot of people like to say winning fixes everything, and it really does.
Right.
So, you know, as I mentioned, there was a lot of behind the scenes pressures and stuff like that going on. And so, you know, it definitely alleviated that and helped propel us towards trying to win that championship that we came very close to doing. And, you know, I think in terms of just sort of propelling me to the next step, the big thing that Red Horse did for me was it really gave me a relationship with Toyota at the time. And they were, you know, pretty pivotal in my next step towards the end of that year, and played a big role in that. And, you know, I'd have to think winning was part of it, right? Winning helped. And, you know, just how competitive we were all season really put us in a position to make that relationship.
So you have a good season in 2012, probably the climax, of course, this win at Talladega. But it wasn't just that. You had a very consistent year, and you're making a case for rising up through the ranks. So then in 2013, a massive year for you. You're driving the Xfinity Series, number 77 kylebusch Motorsports. Finish 9th in points. You get a top 5 at the February Daytona race. End up getting 13 top 10s out of 33 races and 3 top 5s. You weren't technically a rookie that year, but I did do some research, and you would have finished second in the Rookie of the Year standings to Kyle Larson by one position over the course of the year, which I found pretty cool. And if you're gonna do that, then it might as well be Kyle Larson. So then you get 2014, right? You get another massive year, and you get an opportunity to land a full-time Cup Series ride. If you guys remember Swan Motorsports, it was basically almost a brand new team. They were in their 3rd or 4th year. But then in April, the team shuts down quarter way through the season. You're not able to continue racing, and, you know, it's probably obviously a very devastating moment. And, you know, a handful of races in the next couple of years, but then in 2016, you get a win in a one-off ARCA race. And then that kind of leads us to 2017. So you're running part-time with Henderson Motorsports in the number 75 truck. You know, I know we skipped a lot of years there, but you finally are able to kind of start making progress again, running part-time with Henderson. And so then at Talladega, 5 years later at the Fred's 250, the same exact race, 5 years and 8 days later, then this happens. Let's roll the clip.
Can ever make up ground. It's Chase Briscoe on the outside there, getting a little help, but the battle is at the front, and it's Parker Kligerman with some help from Grant Enfinger.
Yeah, that truck pulling out in the middle allowed that top lane to stay formed up and broke the momentum of the bottom lane. And, you know, the top lane was able to get right out in front of those guys when they started getting scattered.
Sauter jumps to the outside, hoping that he gets some help. They're coming through the tri-oval to the white flag. Kligerman by a nose over Enfinger as they cross the line in the final lap, and contact. And a big crash.
And John Hunter Nemechek sneaks through.
And the 8 of John Hunter Nemechek escapes, and it's going to be Parker Kligerman. For the second time, a winner at Talladega. That small team, and there's Chris Carrier. He said it. We're not one of the mega teams. He said, don't take your eye off of it. You won't want to miss it. And wow.
The wheel and how aggressive he was in knowing he needed to win this race.
How about the winning crew chief, Phil?
I am here with Chris Carrier. Chris, you told us just a few moments ago that this is a small team. Well, I guess the good news is Victory Lane won't be that crowded, then, will it? Well, we got a lot of...
2017, you get the win, and of course you're running part-time with Henderson. They've given you probably... When did you start running with them? In 2016?
We attempted to. We actually went to the Talladega race in 2016 and had a brake malfunction qualifying where it stuck the brake on, so we didn't make the race. Then we tried to go to Daytona. We broke a half shaft or main shaft in qualifying, going through the gears. So we didn't make our first 2 races together, but then we went to Atlanta and had a super fast truck. And, you know, there was a lot that happened behind the scenes before that, but the biggest thing, and the person you see in that video when he comes off the pit box, is Chris Carrier. He's the one who really made it happen. You know, I was driving at the 92 truck in 2016, and we'd had some good success. We finished third at Daytona. And Chris and I had always talked about if we could ever come back together and go racing together again, it would be something we both wanted to do. And at some point, the 75 was looking to sort of evaluate their program. And obviously I had a lot more experience in Caleb Holman in those cars and in trucks. And so it was, you know, it came together that we were going to kind of split the ride. And, you know, as we went in 2017, we had some really, really good runs, but that was our last race of the year. And we went down there and I just was like, we're going to win this race. I was like, I don't know why, but I remember leaving my apartment with one of my best buddies and my girlfriend at the time. And I turned to them both and I said, I'm going to win this race. Just watch. And for whatever reason, we went down there and were able to get it done. And it was a huge moment for Henderson Motorsports and Charlie Henderson, Don Henderson, all the Food Country USA employees, Chris, myself. You know, it's validation, and you know, one time's a fluke, twice is a pattern. And that was really cool for me. And I like to say, whenever I needed it, there's always Talladega. And for whatever reason, it's always just been there for me. And I've loved that racetrack. And so, you know, it was another cool, you know, achievement. And one thing it really did for me personally was I had a lot of top 5s at super speedway races, and I felt like I was pretty good. That. But with one win, I was like, man, I don't know. Like if you're really good, you got to win more. And to have 2 wins and then just continually have all the top 5s I've had at the super speedways really, you know, started to make me feel and give me confidence. Like, yeah, you have a knack for this for whatever reason. And that helped.
When you talk about super speedways, a lot of guys don't like them for safety reasons. A lot of guys might be scared because you're going too fast. Do you attribute your success in here to lack of fear or more just practice in the sim?
No, I'm as terrified as everyone. I've woken up on every super speedway race I've ever done. And I've heard this quote from a UFC fighter who said every time they wake up on the morning of a fight, it's like, this is the dumbest thing ever. What am I doing? Yeah. Why am I in this? What am I thinking? I'm just going to get my face demolished. And I think for everyone in super speedway racing, or at least for myself, I've woken up every time being like, what are you thinking? Why are you doing this? You're an idiot. Stop it now. And then, you know, I get the helmet on and all that goes away. And next thing I know, I'm trying to just vie for the win. So it's definitely, I think, only human to fear those races because there's just so many unknowns and so many things out of your control. And it always usually ends with some sort of really tough moment that hurts normally when you get in those wrecks. Right. So
I'm sure
it's, but I think part of that is to the success side, it is mental. And I think I've always gone to those races enjoying them and enjoying the challenge and enjoying the chess game of it all. And I think that's really what I've always found to be so fun about super speedway racing, is that it is a chess game. It is a bit of a mental battle that you're doing at 200 miles an hour. And so it's, I just appreciate that. And I love that. And so, putting aside all the drawbacks of that racing, I think that's 90% of probably what's made me successful, is just having a positive attitude.
Yeah, it's a chess game, and it's a little bit more of a level playing field, and in comparison to maybe your Chicagolands, your Atlantas, because the draft allows your trucks to stay together a little bit more, and it might give a team like Red Horse Racing more of a chance to win than maybe some of the other tracks where it's that you don't have the draft to rely on. And it really is a chess game at 200 miles an hour. So before we get into before we like pass by 2017, quick question: which do you like better, Talladega or Daytona, and why? And why were you able to have, do you think, more success? Was it due to luck? You didn't like the track, or what's the real difference there?
I've always liked Talladega more because it's wider, so you control more of your own destiny. Daytona is
it's thin.
A little bit more truck or car dependent, so it's just tighter, and therefore you can get track position issues, or pit crew can hold you back because it's harder to drive through the field. Whereas Talladega is just wide open. It's just so big. You really control your destiny. And to your point, a team like Henderson Motorsports, that's one of the things that I've done most of my career, is drive for smaller teams. Super speedways are a big opportunity. So that's part of why I've always valued them and looked forward to them. And I think I viewed it as where the driver can make a large difference, which sounds ridiculous, but they can, because it's a chess and mental game. And, obviously there's the mantra, anyone can win at these racetracks, of course. But I think if you look across all super speedway racing, there's going to be certain names that stick out that are far more successful than others. And that's not a fluke.
Right.
If you look at a Joe Logano or a Brad Keselowski or
Austin
Ryan
Hill.
Blaney as of late, Austin Hill in the Xfinity series, right? There is drivers who gravitate towards that type of racing and find a way to continue, to have success. So I think for me, it's, that's why I valued Talladega so much. Daytona is awesome because it pays the most. The first Daytona of the race of the year pays double any other race, at least in the trucks and Xfinity, more than double in Xfinity, so than any other race. So for that reason, it's a very important one, but it is definitely a tougher track and race because it's more car dependent and team dependent.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I really like about you and your career, and it's inspiring because when you have maybe not as much opportunity as the next guy, and you go and you have opportunities at Talladega, you end up getting the win, you end up taking home the dub, you perform well at Daytona, and these are tracks where it's like you bring your truck. You might not have the same horsepower as maybe some of the better teams, but it is one of your only opportunities, as well as road courses, to really step it up. And, as I did some research, but even just as a fan and being able to, witness a lot of these races in my younger years, it's inspiring to see that, someone that not only gets in there, but when the opportunity presents itself, you get into the zone somehow and let go of that fear and end up taking the win. So, this win, right? It's huge. And it's huge because not only did it with a part-time team, but it did open up some opportunities in the next couple of years in the NASCAR Cup Series. So tell us how that came about.
Right. Yeah. Winning fixes everything. And it obviously opens up opportunities, which that win didn't immediately open up any opportunities, but about midway through 2018, I got a call from Marty Gaunt, and he was starting that Cup team, Gaunt Brothers. And he said, I watched that win at Talladega, and I thought, I want that guy driving my car. So that gave me the opportunity to go do some limited Cup starts in 2018, which led into a more substantial schedule in 2019. And we had a lot of awesome success. And it was really cool for me to get back to the Cup Series in some capacity, to get more starts, to get more opportunities there. And, very thankful to Marty for that chance over those 2 years. And, to this day, Marty's a good friend. And it just reminds me that winning always works in NASCAR.
Yeah.
At least it has for me, which I'm sure we'll go into the next version of it. But yeah, winning always propelled me to the next thing.
Yeah. So it seems like, there is a pattern there that, a lot of times as you say, winning fixes everything, it kind of was before some of your biggest opportunities. And so that kind of leads us into my favorite Parker moment, because, you know, it was a moment that I remember sitting on the couch. This was probably one of my most inspirational moments for actually trying to like resume my racing career, because I was sitting on the couch and watching this unfold. So, you know, I'm a road course guy. I've been racing go-karts all my life. I was watching this happen. So you're in your 7th season with Henderson, right? In that 75. One thing, you know, a lot of people know about you is not only are you, you know, a super speedway ace, but you're a road course ringer. And, you know, if you look back on your, you know, your previous years, you get a lot of top 5s. You performed well. I've seen a lot of that stuff happen. And with the same truck you took into Talladega, you know, you're not running full time, right? So from that point in Talladega to 2022, where we're about to roll into our next clip, you only ran 28 races. However, you finished in the top 10 16 times. So that's basically a 60% top 10 rate. And, you know, no wins, but there was massive consistency, even though maybe you didn't have the funding and some starts were hard to come by. But then this happened at Mid-Ohio on July 9th, 2022, right? So you're leading nearly the whole race. You know, you kind of lose the lead towards the end. And then on a restart with 3 laps to go, this happens.
38, though, Zane's got that drive. Parker's going to try to pack a little air into that right rear.
For the lead, Kligerman and Zane Smith in the final laps at Mid-Ohio. Kligerman's going to get the spot.
And that's exactly the place you want to put that. You want to put that pressure on that leader to make that mistake. He can't drive around 99% right now. It's got to be right on it. And that's here, Strongman.
In this series, but he hasn't won since 2017. It's been a while. Zane Smith, 3 wins this season. Can Smith get to the bumper and make another move on Kligerman before the end in the final lap here? One last shot at him. One more time. Can he get to the bumper? No, it's Parker Kligerman winning at Mid-Ohio.
Wonderful, awesome job by both of those drivers. What a professional go.
Parker Kligerman, ladies and gentlemen.
He's absolutely so climbing out of the race car. Parker.
I remember watching this. I was, like I said, I was on my couch, and, you know, it's just, for me, as you know, I've been the underdog in racing a lot of times, maybe a little bit less money than others. And to see that 75 truck past that 38 truck is pretty epic. Especially, you know, you come around the last couple laps, and then, you know, the 38 truck's right on you for that last little left-hander at Mid-Ohio. How did that feel?
Yeah, it was one of the coolest battles I've ever been in by far. And, you know, credit to Zane for keeping it clean. We definitely stock car race with some contact, but all fair game in the level that we went to. And, you know, that win, and it's just that battle was so cool. That weekend was so cool. We were super fast in practice. We went into qualifying, and it was raining in qualifying. And I went like 2.5 seconds faster than the field it was in 2 groups. And then the second group, it dried out, and they won the pole by like half a second. But I ended up qualifying second, but I was so pissed because I had the pole by like a billion, and Chris made me pit. And I was like, no, I could go way faster. He's like, you're in the lead by 2.5 seconds. I think we were going fast enough. So we were just on it, and then we got in the race and took control pretty early on. And then, you know, Zane became our top challenger, and I let him get ahead of us at the end of some of the stages because I was not worried about stage points first and foremost. And then secondly, we were trying to conserve the truck, conserve the brakes. I could tell I was pushing it pretty hard. And so we got to that last bit and it just became a battle royale. And it was, I don't remember every moment. I've watched it back and seen some of the blocks down the front stretch and such that we threw. And it was so cool. And it's such a cool, like, couple of laps. And people told me it's one of their favorite battles in NASCAR, which is so flattering. But I loved it. It was definitely my most emotional win, I would say. Just a couple years prior when we went into 2020, I had lost my cup ride because of, Daniel Suarez took it over for the full year with funding. And then the Henderson Motorsports team was actually in a tough spot. And so I had put them together with a funded driver who was going to take over that ride for that year. And so I was pretty convinced my racing career was over. I just turned 30 and I was like, all right, this is it, bud. It's been a good run. You've tried like hell. But this is just the sport telling you that it's time to move on. And so I was pretty convinced it was over. I was looking at other options in life and trying to sort of see what I wanted to do in my life. And then a couple months into 2020 through the pandemic, I got a call from the Hendersons. They said, actually, we want to go racing again. Do you want to come do some races? And I was like, you know what? Yes. And so we ended up getting our first race at Pocono 2020 and we started dead last. And I remember standing on the grid and thinking, hey, bud, you've lost all of this. It's all disappeared. Just enjoy it. Have fun. Like this is, you're getting a bonus now. And I said one more thing, which is on the grid. I looked around and I was like, I love this shit. This is awesome. And so we started dead last in that race, I think we finished top 15, and it propelled us into having just great results through 2020, even better results than 21. And then 22 was an insane year. I mean, I think we averaged like a top 10 finishing position, like 9th or something like that through the year. And like we ran, I think, half the races or less than half the races and still finished top 20 in points. Obviously won a race. It was just ginormous, the level of performance that we had that year. And hopefully we can find that again this upcoming year.
Yeah. So you definitely, overperform, right? So, you have an expectation if you put the average driver into a car and, maybe that expectation isn't a lot of top 10s for that truck. How does that correlate to your next opportunity, which ended up happening in 2023? So Parker, just for you guys that don't know, Parker began racing full-time in the number 48 Big Machine Chevy with Scott Borchetta, and he made the playoffs both years, right? So how did this win and maybe your performance as a whole in 22 bring about that opportunity for you to get started in 23?
Right. Yeah. So back to the whole idea that winning works in NASCAR. That's what happened. So I was trying to
just the win.
Well, it was a combination of things. So I'd seen that 48 car was going through a series of different drivers through that year. Right. And I had been working the TV side of NBC. So I'd gone in there and tried to like introduce myself and say, hey, if I can get a chance, I'd love to. And so I started sort of like, doing the thing you do, which is networking and trying to see like, hey, is there an opportunity? I'd be interested. Can I come to a race? Yeah. Whatever. And I didn't get that far. And then I won Mid-Ohio. And while I was in Victory Lane, I didn't have my phone, but I saw this. I had a voicemail from Keith Barnwell, who was the GM at the time of Big Machine Racing. And he said, hey, bud, congrats. This is the call you want to get when you've won a race, but would you like to come do Talladega for Big Machine Racing?
Nice.
So I ended up calling him back later that evening when I was heading to the airport and said, I'm in. And so we had a great result with them. And Scott, reached out to me a couple months later and was like, hey, would you like to be the driver full time in 2023? And so, that was a pretty amazing moment. I wasn't sure I was going to do it. I was going through a lot of negotiations on the TV side, and I just didn't know if it was the right thing to do. And I actually, funny enough, in August of 22, I like to talk about manifesting that sort of thing because I do somewhat believe in it, I guess. And so I had this board in my office, and I just walked up to it one day and wrote 2023 Truck Series champion. Now I had no full-time ride. We had no sponsors. We had tried everything with the Hendersons. Literally 3 weeks later, I get a call from a top-level championship truck team that was like, hey, we want you to come race full-time for us and race for the championship. And I was like, what? We tried to do a deal with them and the Hendersons combined because I didn't want to leave the Hendersons completely. And it was looking like most likely I was just going to have to go drive for them full-time, which have to is a funny term. But nonetheless, I thought about it. And then literally 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, I got the call from Scott asking if I wanted to do Xfinity full time. So I had to call that truck team and say, hey, I'm going to decline this offer. Thank you very much, because I've got a full time Xfinity ride. So it was a crazy time. I can't believe it. I mean, I had been 9 years without a full time ride. I had not been able to put together stable sponsorship or anything like that that would have enabled any of that to happen. And by winning this race, it just put me on enough of a map for people to pay attention and want me to be behind the wheel of the race car. And thank you to Scott. You know, he gave me another chance at a racing career, and really in the end gave me the biggest gift, which was to sort of end this journey and this, this endeavor on my own terms. And I'll forever be grateful for that.
So was it a hard decision to do Xfinity versus like a top level truck?
You know, I felt like back when I was in 2012 into 2013, where I probably should have stayed in trucks in 2012 and won about 10 races that year. But at the time, the truck series wasn't as well respected as the Xfinity series. So you sort of had to make the leap if you could. And I didn't know if I'd have another chance, because the budget difference between truck and Xfinity was so massive. If you had a chance like I did with KBM, you had to take it. Yeah. This time, you know, it was a discussion. It was a tough decision, because I did have to change what I was doing on the TV side and that sort of thing. And, you know, I just felt like with trucks, I had kind of done it, and I'd done it for so many years, but Xfinity was sort of like the what if, right? And why not take a risk? And so I'm glad I did. You know, it's honestly been a very cool 2 years, but I wish we were more successful. I wish we would have won, but it was a great life experience for me, and I learned a ton. And I think it really helped me with the amount of races I did come to terms with my racing career. And I think the thing that also was a part of it was that if I went and did Xfinity, I knew I could still race races for the Hendersons and trucks. So that played a big part of me making the decision to think that I should go do the Xfinity deal.
Yeah, and I think this win at Mid-Ohio, at least just in like the general like meta of the NASCAR space, it was kind of a moment where it kind of turned you into like a cult hero in a sense, because you're going, and it's not like, again, it's not like you have this full time. It's not like you're like a young gun at this point. You get the win, and then you get the opportunity. So you get this opportunity, right? And then you got 2023. Really cool year. I think the first race you did with them for that year, it was a top 5 at Daytona, or it might have been a 24 top 5, not sure. But all in all, across these 2 years with the team, you got 33 top 10s across 66 races, which is exactly 50% top 10 with a team.
That's funny.
It's that's very impressive. For a team that isn't expected to win the championships. You make the playoffs both years, 13 top 5s, right? A lot of close calls for wins, and there was a stretch in 2023. There's a 17 race stretch where in that 17 races you got 13 top 10s and 5 top 5s. So you were like hitting your stride. You make the playoffs. I remember the rise. You make the playoffs, unexpected. 2024, another year, fans desperately wanting to see you back in victory lane. And so I want to get your thoughts on this 2024 moment, probably one of the craziest moments in NASCAR for 2024, and how this moment affected you personally, and how it, changed your outlook going into this year, 2025.
Parker Kligerman still with the advantage. Coming up on the final lap.
Oh no! Way deep into the tire barrier.
The 42, that's Leland Honeyman. And he is stuck completely underneath that tire barrier.
Get to the white.
White flag in the air. One more time around. The next flag. And the caution comes out. Did he get to the white flag before the caution came out?
Make sure you come back to the checker.
This could be the biggest win of Parker Kligerman's life.
Could be it. We got the white.
Before the caution came out, it looks as though the white was in the air. He crossed the start-finish line. And that would mean Parker Kligerman wins his first Xfinity Series race.
He's got to get back to the line. And we've seen strange things happen in this sport. So let's get him back to the line first. But
If indeed he wins this race, I'm going to tell you something. That was a drive of his life. He had Sam Mayer behind him with a faster race car, and he never made a mistake.
Caution came out prior to the white flag being displayed before he got to the start-finish line.
Well, here's the white flag.
Here's the flag, but the caution lights, it's not the flag man, it's the caution lights. So that's really it. I mean, from that angle right there, it looked like it was clearly to the white. We're going to have to find a better picture of it.
Timing-wise, did he cross the start-finish line before the caution light came out? And we're showing overtime right now because we're hearing from NASCAR that he didn't get to the start-finish line before the caution came out.
So that's the rule. The rule is literally the Okay, so let's see. 48, you see the white flag, you see the 48. I don't see a caution light, still no caution lights. He's clearly over the line. Caution lights come on.
Now it came on, yeah.
We back it up a couple frames. There's one right here. Look at this one right here. There's a caution light right there. We roll it forward frame by frame.
Oh, it's right at the line.
Damn.
So there's even, this is going to sound crazy, there is a delay between hitting the button and the lights come on. It's in the hundredths of a second.
Yeah.
But this comes down to electronics for NASCAR. They know by a timestamp when the yellow came out, and they know by timestamp when he crossed the start-finish line. We've seen how many races this
that
year
we did not receive the
by
white.
1,000.
At the time of caution.
So they're claiming this is the absolute timestamp of the yellow. That is a screenshot of where the 48 is. It doesn't look that close in live, but remember, there is a delay to the yellow lights. So it's all electronic now.
We got to get this fixed. The one car on the left side of the racetrack. The one goes to the outside.
He blocks that inside. The one tried to go to the outside. A crossover move. Here comes Mayer on the inside.
Can he get into third gear? That's been the problem. Looks like a clean shift this time for the one car.
Oh, tire roll on the 48.
Yeah, the left front is smoking for the 48. Here comes the 16 now. Mayer in front. One. Sam Mayer is going to win at the Roval.
Way to fight, buddy.
SVG looks like it'll end up potentially 2 points out of the playoffs. Love finishes up in that position, and Love is going to advance.
What a race. What a great job by Sam Mayer of staying calm.
Parker Kligerman, but he surely gained some fans with the drive he made to what looked like a victory. It wasn't that way. Sam Mayer drove the 48 clean as could be in those final laps, and it pays off.
Brutal moment.
Brutal.
Everyone remembers it. Brutal to have to go over it, but I do think it's important because, you know, the way that you drove that car through the race, I remember watching it. I was freaking rooting for you. And it honestly it felt like you got robbed. But in the broader picture of things, so, you know, this is coming down to one of the last races of your career. Obviously not the result you expected. How does that change your outlook now that, you know, in 2025, now you've got, you're stepping into the Xfinity booth to call all the races. You did the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona. How does, like, just, you know, was it a sign for you, or was the writing on the wall at that point already? How does that, you know, coming from then to today, what significance, like, does that moment have for you?
You know, it's oddly one of my favorite racing moments ever, because for the 10 laps prior, as Jeff Burton said so eloquently, it was the drive of my life. And I knew it as I was doing it. And, you know, I had already made the decision to, you know, move on from pursuing full-time racing. I knew that, obviously. You know, there was the playoff implications at the time, which is a pressure like no one will ever understand until you're in it. When you go into a race and halfway through the race, it becomes clear you have to win that race to advance, to keep your championship hopes alive. And so, you know, there was a lot riding on it. And I'd watched that from the TV side so often, but I'd never lived it. And so, you know, we came within a point or two of making the second round of the playoffs in 23, but this time I was like, we're going to make it. And I just felt like, you know, when we came down late in that race, I just remember getting to the lead and then knowing Sam Mayer was behind me. And I asked on the radio, does he have to win? Because I don't know at the time. They're like, yep, he has to win as well. So I thought in my head, all right, battle royale, it's on. let's go. You've come out on top of one of these before at Mid-Ohio a couple years ago. You can do this. And I knew, though, our car was just not as good as we needed to be. And so I said to myself, going to the banking one time, I was like, hey, bud, you've got to find more. And I don't know where you find it or how, but you've got to find more. And then from that moment, Sam caught me. We, did a crossover over underpass, got back by him and started to drive away. And as we were coming to the white flag, we had such a big lead. I was like, oh, we got it. We got it. Let alone I didn't even know about the caution part.
Right.
But
yeah.
I was like, oh, we got it. And then we crossed the line and I'm thinking, hey, we won. That's awesome. We did it. Let's go. And I had the elation. I definitely cried. And then I looked on the big screen that they have at Charlotte that you can see as you're going through turns 3 and 4 in the Roval. And I could see Patrick celebrating off the box. And so I'm like, all right, we definitely won. We definitely won. And then they're like, no, man, you didn't get the white. And so I knew I've seen this enough in NASCAR to know what went down. But it was brutal. But, I walked away. After it was all said and done, I walked to my car out in the parking lot outside of it. And I just sort of sat there for a moment and said, hey, like, if anyone ever doubted you left it all on the table, or if you ever doubted in yourself that you didn't put everything you had into it, then just go watch this back. Because, when I see those last 10 laps, I get a sense of pride. I get a sense of, a guy who, when the back was against the wall, found more. And, that's something I'll always be proud of and feel like is a moment that I can always kind of look back fondly, even though the result wasn't there. I know I drove a race winning worthy drive. And that matters the most to me.
I think maybe if you're not a race fan, you look at a car driving, around a road course, something like that. It's just a car. But, when you're someone who knows what it's like to be on a road course and absolutely drive the wheels off it, you can tell. And it was absolutely clear to everyone watching that this was the drive of your career and that you were doing absolutely everything you could be on the wheel. And you were, behind the wheel, and you were in the zone and, making stuff happen that maybe shouldn't have worked in a typical car. And you made the car work, the tires smoking by the end of it. And yeah, I think it's, the reason why I put this at the end is because I think it's really encapsulates your story. A guy who, made something happen that shouldn't have. You fit a square peg in a round hole. NASCAR's a lot about money, and you're able to, just absolutely come out with this like amazing career. And hats off to you, Parker, on an amazing career. I'm really excited to keep following you, behind the camera. And I was following obviously the Rolex. I wasn't able to go because my baby niece was in Miami. I had to go see her, but I'm really excited to see, of course you're going to be having some more opportunities in NASCAR this year, and your story is amazing. It's an inspiration to us all. I hope, if you guys are watching, you guys were able to learn something from this guy, and that's, I really appreciate you coming on. If you guys like NASCAR, you like media, make sure to follow his YouTube channel, The Money Lap with Landon Castle. And that seems to be kind of your focuses. So if you have any closing thoughts, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. No, it's well said. And, it's been a journey of a lifetime. I'm just a kid who honestly saw this sport on TV and said, I want to do that. And somehow it became a career that I'm very grateful and flattered to have made happen. And, it definitely didn't pan out the way I wanted. And I've definitely not been as successful as I wanted, but there's a real joy in the journey. And I think that's one of the things I really have learned throughout this whole deal is that you can enjoy the process and the journey much more than the results. And I feel very young. I'm only 34, so there's a lot of life ahead of me. But this chapter of my life was unbelievably rewarding, unbelievably tough, and pressure filled, and anxiety ridden. But I would say that I wouldn't change it for the world. And if you're anyone out there, like you said, that's thinking about chasing something out there, whether it's in racing or outside of it or whatever you want to do, there's absolutely there's success in the chase. And I would say go after it.
Yeah. And I would definitely implore anyone to chase your dreams. And turn those dreams into goals and then turn those goals into reality. And, you're still young, and I hope that maybe we can see you in some sort of Le Mans or sports car a little bit more often soon. So Parker, thank you honestly so much for joining. And with all that being said, guys, I will see you on the next edition of ZBC Racing, and ciao for now.